Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Another Friday, another week has flown by.
So,
Um,
so time.
Pascal was saying earlier that it was a slip of the tongue, but she called this a show. And I do think that as we continue doing these every week, and we're now on number 5 or number 6, it is starting to feel like maybe number 5. Um, cut to another few meetings from now, and this will start to look like a cabaret for real. Which maybe that's the direction this needs to go in. It's whatever we need. I'm going to just run through the agenda really quickly. As you're coming in, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and say where you're coming from. And Pascal has also posted a link to the agenda that you can take a look at. We're really excited to have Margaret Reed from the Health Commission here. I've been providing some health updates, public health updates, but it's great to have Margaret to actually speak from the commission. We're going to be hearing about an audience research study that organizations may want to participate in. We're going to get our update from Emily from Mass Creative on state and federal advocacy issues. And then we're going to hear from Brain Arts, Boston Public Library, Arts Connect International, and Arts Boston, and then any remaining time for a Q&A. So thanks again for being here and for coming back, and it's good to see everybody. And I think with that, I'm ceding my normal time to Margaret, and we can start with a public health update. And Margaret, you may need to unmute yourself.
Thanks. Sorry about that. So thank you, Kara, for inviting me, and Pascal for setting me up. And this is such a great opportunity for us at the health department to join these calls with other city departments and their constituencies as a way to hear what's going on, how people are affected and certain communities are affected, and also to get out some of our basic public health information. So Kara and Pascal kindly made a slide for me. For health departments, one of our core functions is data. Collecting it, analyzing it, and sharing it. At the Boston Public Health Commission, we've had a commitment to racial equity in our work for many, many years, and that includes collecting data by race and ethnicity and stratifying our data by race and ethnicity, including health data, economic data, other data like jobs, careers, things like that. So we have been with the mayor of Boston daily reporting on the impact of COVID in the city of Boston. So you have data in front of you that probably came out 5 minutes ago, literally, because this is about the time of day where we publish the daily status. So currently we have 4,763 confirmed cases. 708 of those have recovered. It's really important for people to remember that you actually can recover from COVID, and many people get it mildly. Sadly, we've lost 122 people. This is on today's website, but it actually is yesterday's data, so you can stay tuned. In an hour or two, the numbers will sadly look different. One of the things that's really important is about a week ago, and if people have questions about what the processes are, I'm happy to answer them. We were able to start publishing data for Boston by race and ethnicity. And about that data, the one thing I really want to stress is that we are already seeing racial and ethnic disparities in COVID-19 cases in Boston. 41% of our cases yesterday were among Black African-American Bostonians. And that was by far the highest percentage of any population. And Black Bostonians are represented in the Boston population in the mid 20%. So this is a very disproportionate. And we know that there are social indicators like who are our frontline workers that are being exposed, who lives in more crowded environments. So when we talk about social distancing, who's it harder for? So those are at the health department, not just presenting the data, but really what does the data direct us to do? And I do want to make a pitch for like arts and culture and our other city departments, because I have part of my job is joining a lot of these calls each week, and I've been so amazed with our mayor's office of immigrant advancement, our economic development with their small businesses, one of our departments with the faith leaders. They're interacting with community members weekly around the impact and how to mitigate the impact of this virus and to get public health information out. And I'm probably going to mute after, well, I'm obviously going to mute, but I might remove the screen afterwards after I'm done, but I am going to listen because I was so pleased to see that you are having a discussion about that on the agenda today. On this screen, it mentions that a couple of weeks ago, our Mayor Walsh, we had at the health department declared a public health emergency, which it is, it's a pandemic, a few weeks ago. And then a couple of weeks ago, Mayor Walsh put out a public health advisory, really expecting people and advising people to really practice strict social distancing. And that means unless you are part of the essential workforce, be home in the evening. If you are outside of your home, be wearing a face cover. It does not have to be a mask, just something that covers your face, and stay physically 6 feet apart. And that actually works. Social distancing works, and it is already impacting what we've got a whole new language now with COVID-19. So it's already impacting the curve, and it's lowering the curve, so that we very well should expect to have fewer cases and fewer deaths from COVID because of the effects of social distancing. There's one other thing I want to do, if Pascal will change the slide, is direct you to our website. We report on data on our website every single day, and on the right-hand side, under the tweets, we do weekly data reports. So we really build out age, race, and ethnicity, gender, zip code. And there's going to be more data this week. That usually comes out about 4 p.m, and I understand it's on time. Another public health function is community awareness and community education. So if this is a screenshot, if you could scroll down, you'd see a lot of buttons. Maybe it isn't a screenshot, I don't know. That's fine. They're pretty straightforward. How to stay safe, a link to the City of Boston website, which is amazing for all the services, food access, employment. And on ours, we have a lot of information materials and a lot of public awareness materials, like multilingual posters that you're welcome to use in your environments. And many of our materials are in up to 10 or 11 languages. So I'm going to stop there. If people have any questions for me, do I have another couple of minutes, Kara, or no, for questions?
Yes, we have a couple of minutes for questions.
Great. Do anybody have any questions or comments, things we should know at the health department?
If you have questions, feel free to add them to the chat.
Thank you so much.
So we have one question. Does this data include the homeless men and women who are tested positive but asymptomatic?
So I haven't been asked that question before. We are testing. So no, this is COVID cases. So cases are people that have been tested and are positive. So was the question homeless and positive but asymptomatic?
That's right, yes.
So it's great if you're asymptomatic. If you test positive, you still need to practice, you know, staying home and away from people. Homeless people that live in Boston are part of our Boston residents. So I can clarify, and we do have a tracking system. I can clarify this data. However, I would think that if they're being tested in Boston and live in Boston, then they're part of our Boston data.
We have another question that says, will you give the reasons again for the disparity in race, aka density in living situations, who is on the front lines, and what else?
So first of all, I would say COVID-19 is what's called novel, which means new. So we are learning as we go, and that's part of what makes it really scary. So there hasn't been a lot of research on racial inequities in outcomes. However, there is a long history of health data and related to social inequities. We do know that there's a lot of information around how jobs are stratified and income by race and ethnicity, right? And there is even neighborhood data in Boston for where our multi-unit housing is concentrated. And we are seeing little, using the word cluster is scary to people. We're seeing little clusters in places where there are a lot of people. So what when we tend to think about infection, it's like if you're crowded and you have a high, and you're more, and you're out in the universe, then it's easier to get exposed, right? So if you have to go to work and you work in a grocery store, or you work at a homeless shelter, or you work in a healthcare institution, that instead of doing what I'm doing right now, which is working from home, then you are going to be at higher risk of being exposed.
Right. And we have one last question. What data does the health department expect to have in order to make recommendations around large-scale gatherings?
That's a very good question. Right now, through May 4th, the governor has decided that there won't be any. And, May 4th is, May 4th could change, could become a different date. And there is data as a state, Boston is part of it, but it's a statewide effort. There is modeling going on that is kind of indicating to us what the trajectory of what we call the surge is happening. And, we're still a week or two out from things getting even worse. Things may get worse for the next couple of weeks before they start getting better.
And then this is our final question, then we'll move on. I know there is an arts project underway for the people recovering from COVID-19 at the Boston Convention Center. Do we know how many people are currently being treated and or quarantined there?
No, but I bet I can look that up while we're here when you move on and put it in the chat.
Great, that'd be super helpful. Anything else, Margaret?
No, thank you so much. And I'm happy to, I know the convention center, I do get daily reports, so it's populating, every day. So I can look and get that back to you, but thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Margaret. And she'll be on for the rest of the call. So if anyone continues to have any questions, we can address those for the last 20, 25 minutes of the meeting. All right, we'll bring it over to Jen. And I think we can go to the next slide as well, Christina.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate the invitation, Cara and Pascal, to bring this study to all of your attention and to tell you a little bit about it. I'll try to be quick and would be happy to answer questions on here or afterwards. I am the Vice President and Co-Director of Research at Slover Lynette Audience Research in Chicago, which is a firm that does audience research with arts and cultural organizations across the country, mainly around broadening and deepening access and engagement to arts and culture. Like others in the arts and cultural sector, we've really been asking ourselves, how do we contribute during this crisis to the organizations that we love so much and that we work with, as well as the general public and arts attenders. And as researchers, it may not be too surprising that research was on the top of our list of ways that we could help. We really think that a shared, really empirical picture of arts audiences and the wider American community could help us, become more grounded and guide a collective response to this crisis. So we've partnered with LaFlaca Cohen, a strategy firm that you may be familiar with as well. They have created the Culture Track, tracking study of cultural participation in the US that's been around for, I think, 20 plus years now. You may be familiar with it. And we're creating this emergency edition, a COVID edition of Culture Track. We shift over to the next slide. Perfect. Oh, it's a little bit small. Sorry about that. So just a little information on what we're doing. First of all, we want to understand a lot of different people and how they're connecting with, dealing with this crisis, how they're being served or could be further served by organizations in the future. So we'll have a general US population, that's that top darker green bubble of 2,000. We're working with a really great panel provider here at University of Chicago at NORC to provide that. But we also want to make sure that we're getting a really nuanced, deep picture of arts and cultural organizations and bringing in the voices of arts and cultural visitors, attenders, members, subscribers from all kinds of organizations into this sample. So we're also planning to send a survey out to lists of a wide range of arts and cultural organizations across the country. And we're making access to this survey publicly available and free for anybody who wants to participate, who has audiences, visitors, however you want to think about that kind of stakeholder group as part of their, as part of a list that they could share. I've got the timeline under here below. We're trying to make this happen really quickly too, because as we're seeing day by day, things change really rapidly. And so we're trying to get in the field within the next couple of weeks and then have insights back out the end of May or in June to the field. Can we switch over to the next slide? Fantastic. So here are some of the things that we want to learn about that we're prioritizing. The survey is currently very much under development, and we have a group of, I think, 18 or 20 stakeholders who are part of that development. And so they're helping to shape, guide us, practitioners and researchers who are giving their opinions and helping us develop this. But we want to understand, what are people's lives like during COVID? What are they doing? How are they filling their time? Is arts and culture a piece of that or not? To what extent is that a piece of that? If they're engaging with digital offerings, what are those offerings? What kind of value are they getting out of those offerings? We want to understand what they used to do so that we can get a sense of their whole kind of multivariate relationship to arts and culture, not just the organization that they come in on. And then some information about how they feel about supporting arts and cultural organizations, what they might miss, and what they're starting to plan for in the future. Views on how cultural organizations could be supporting their communities or are supporting their communities now. And then, lots of demographics so that we know who we're hearing from and can do some splits that may be helpful to understand them in more detail. Okay, let's go to the final slide. Great. So just a few additional pieces here. What organizations are eligible to participate? It's all arts and cultural organizations across the country who have audiences or visitors of some kind that they have lists of. We're up to, I think we're at like 200 participating organizations right now. I think we have 7 from Boston, which is great, but we would welcome more. We're particularly eager to have smaller organizations or those that are culturally specific respond and be part of this study. We feel like those are really important viewpoints that sometimes get lost in the shuffle of some of these big, really huge scale arts and culture organizations, many of whom have opted in to participate already. So that's, if you're small, if you have, 10,000 visitors in a year, we absolutely want to hear from you as well as if you're large. What organizations will receive? So you will be able to, every organization that participates will get a unique login that they can then kind of access the survey platform and see a set of charts and statistics on how their list responded specifically. So you'll be able to see data about your organization, as well as once we have the national report available, you'll be able to compare it to that national picture. We're looking to see if we can get a funder to provide a really fun kind of interactive data tool where you could do a bunch of splitting the sample. If you're a music organization, you might want to look at your attenders, but also those, everybody going to music organizations specifically. So still a little TBD on how much granularity of analysis we'll be able to provide, but there will be some, and you'll certainly get access to your own data. What will they be asked for? We're just asking for a few pieces of information about your organization, in large part so we can make sure that the population of organizations participating is diverse on all of these dimensions, scale, geography, focus area, those are the core ones. So we have a couple of questions for you, but that's all. And then we're having organizations send the survey link out themselves to their list. So you don't have to send us your list. You don't have to provide access to your list. You hold on to that data. And then how to get involved. There's a really great FAQ site that's on the culturetrack.com/COVID study website that includes all of the questions that we've gotten in from organizations as they've been considering whether to participate. And then at the bottom, there's kind of next steps. What information do we need and who should you get in touch with? You can also email me directly. I'd be delighted to hear from you. I'm jen@slurberlandknight.com. I think I've covered most of it. I know that was a whirlwind. Any questions?
We do have a couple of questions, Jen, in the chat, but I do want to make sure we have time for Emily before we have 4 speakers to speak in just a second. If that works for you, if that's okay.
I'm flexible.
Great. So if you could, there are questions in the chat. So if you can answer in the chat, and we'll move on to Emily from Mass Creative to give us an update about the state.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Jen.
Good afternoon, all. These are 2 hard acts to follow. This is great information and great efforts that are happening. So I'm going to try to give some sort of top line items. So the first one is that I'm sure many of you heard 2 days ago, the Small Business Administration announced that they had officially run out of funds for both the Paycheck Protection Program and the EIDL program. That's obviously very troubling for many of us who are still waiting to hear on our applications for those programs. I do understand that right now members of Congress are working on what they're calling the CARES Act 1.5, which would literally be an amendment to open up the CARES Act, replenish money in both of those accounts. So that more money can go out. There's some negotiations regarding what else they want to what else could be included in that. And so that's where the breakdown is happening, and that's why it hasn't been replenished yet. But there's clearly people working on that, members of Congress working on that. There's also talk right now, as I've mentioned for the last 3 weeks, of a 4th stimulus bill. And we want to make sure that the creative community, that's our arts organizations, our cultural organizations, our creative and interpretive sciences, are reflected and seen in that document, in that bill. So there are a couple of different advocacy alerts that are circulating right now. we have some on our website. I know the New England Aquarium also put one out with some partners, as well as the Children's Museum. Please, if you have the opportunity, take a look at those and add your name to supporting those documents and those asks. The other piece, so that's the federal piece that I understand. So then on the state level, it was a sobering week. As I told you last week, I was eager to hear a economic virtual roundtable that the joint chairs of Ways and Means and the Secretary Heffernan, who's Secretary of Administration and Finance, were holding, that then got postponed due to technical difficulties. So that happened on Tuesday of this week. They had the Treasurer Goldberg, testify, as well as the executive directors of the Mass Budget and Policy Center, the Mass Taxpayers Association, and economists from UMass Dartmouth, all talking about what the economic outlook is for state revenues in Massachusetts. And unsurprisingly, it is not good. This year, so the fiscal year goes, we are right now in the fourth quarter of the fiscal year for fiscal year 20. And the prior 3 quarters were actually really great. We were ahead of where we were supposed to be as a state in terms of collecting revenues. And then COVID-19 hit in this quarter, and the revenues have fallen off. So there's steep decline in all revenue areas. And there is some real obvious concern about how long that decline will stay in place, because we still don't know when we're going to be able to resume a new normal, right? And kind of get back to the business of leaving our homes and being in our jobs. The other confounding factor that they talked a lot about is consumer behavior, right? So people aren't spending as much. A lot of people have lost their jobs, and there's economic insecurity that is leading folks to not spending as much, which is also affecting tax revenues. So that is all really sobering news. And what it means is that the state budget process, right, which is what a lot of us pay attention to this time of year, is again totally different than what we expected it to be. There is some talk about doing it on a month-by-month basis because the forecasts are so unknowable. That's not a great word for today, but apologies, it's Friday. And then the other piece, so that may happen. And then the other real concern is paying for this last fiscal quarter, right? So the state is still spending money and they need to figure out how to pay for this last quarter. So there's some real concern there. But we also know that the legislature is working really hard right now. So this is where I'm going to share a little bit of good news before I go back to the money conversation. I just saw in Twitter that the House formally passed the moratorium on rent evictions and mortgage foreclosures. That is a huge deal. It is literally, I suspect right now, it has landed on Governor Baker's desk. This means that and because it's an emergency declaration, an emergency piece of legislation, as soon as Baker signs it, it would go into effect. And it means that from the point of when the emergency declaration was made by Governor Baker through 45 days after he lifts that declaration, or 120 days total, there is a moratorium on evicting someone because they haven't been able to pay their rent due to COVID-19 and loss of wages. This is also true for commercial leases for small businesses and nonprofit organizations, right, who might have a commercial lease that they're not able to pay. It's also true for folks who have mortgages. The mortgage holder can't foreclose on you and evict you. This is so important. And it really was watching a number of leaders in the legislature push and negotiate to get to a deal that everyone could feel good about. So I'm really glad that we've supported this. We obviously were following suit of the housing advocates, including CHAPA, Mass Association of Community Development Corporations, and City Life, who've done an amazing job of organizing and advocating around this issue. So we were glad to maybe just add a little bit of lift, but certainly the credit goes to all of them and other housing advocates and organizers. So That's the good news. So we still don't know when we're going to see an economic relief bill come out of the state legislature. They're also, again, waiting on the feds to see what the feds are going to do in terms of a fourth stimulus bill that I talked about earlier. So those are a couple of pieces. I think some of you saw that the Mass Cultural Council this week released the findings of their second survey data from organizations. The organizations have reported since they combined the losses from both the first and the second survey, that it's $250 million has been reported lost thanks to COVID-19. And the pandemic crisis. So that's, again, really hard data, but that kind of data helps us make the case and helps us build the case about why the creative community needs support and needs to be included in any relief packages that are being put together on the federal and the state level. The next thing that I want to talk about briefly is, so this is policy, shall we say policy adjacent. So the Massachusetts Health Connector, in response to COVID-19, pushed out their enrollment deadlines. So that means that if all of a sudden you have found yourself let go from your job and no longer eligible for your company's health insurance plan, or not able to make those COBRA payments, or you've seen a steep decline in your income thanks to COVID-19, and you're not able to make a premium payment that you have through the health insurance marketplace, they have extended their deadlines, and you can go to the Massachusetts Health Connector. If we can go to the next slide. They have extended it through May 25th. So if you apply by May 23rd, your coverage start date will be June 1st. Oh, excuse me, let me go back. If you apply by April 23rd, your start date will be May 1st. If you apply by May 23rd, it'll be June 1st for your start date. And then if you apply by May 25th, your start date will be July 1st. They've got a really great website that kind of helps you go through with a great FAQ that talks about which plan is right for you. Some of the coverage policies available are $0 or extremely, extremely affordable. So if you find yourself in that situation, I want to make sure that you all know about that resource. I think for now, those are the updates that I have. As always, things are quickly moving, and we are trying to keep everyone as up to date as possible. Thanks for the time.
Thank you so much, Emily. And Emily will be on the call till the end. So if anybody has questions for her, please either put them in the chat or wait till our Q&A section. Thanks again, Emily. All right, let's go to the next slide. Great. So now we're going to move into our share out section. So we'll start with Emma from Brain Arts Organization.
Hey, can you guys hear me? Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for having us on, and thanks so much for organizing these calls every week. It's honestly been a really great ritual for me. Yeah, so I'm talking now from Brain Arts Organization. We are a small nonprofit, volunteer-run, community-based arts organization based in Fields Corner, Dorchester. A little background for folks who don't know about us. We have a few different projects. We have, first and foremost, our headquarters, the Dorchester Art Project, which is a multi-use art space in Fields Corner. We have artist studios, a gallery, performance space, and a storefront. And then we also have a newspaper that we put out, the Boston Compass newspaper, which is a free arts and culture guide, which we distribute all over Boston. And we have a flea market that we do in Cambridge called the Brain Arts Market, as well as other projects. So before, this pandemic, we were quite busy as an organization, especially a volunteer-run organization. But obviously, we've been hugely impacted by this. And, along with everyone else, we've had to cancel all of our events. We've had to close our doors at our art space. We're leaving it open to our tenants. We have 14 artist studios here, and they can remain relatively isolated in their space. So we're keeping it open to them. And that is actually what pays our rent of the space. So, you know, luckily we're not in danger of not being able to pay our rent at our headquarters right now, which is great. We can't distribute our newspaper because we distribute to, you know, libraries and cafes and small businesses. So we've had to adapt and just distribute directly to people's houses, or we started using little free libraries like all over the city, which we're not sure how well that's going to work, but we did a really limited run of our newspaper to save some costs. Yeah, I mean, right before this happened, literally the day before we were going into quarantine, we were looking through our budget and had plans to take on a few more part-time folks. We were gonna, you know, pay stipends out to like 8 more people. And then literally the next day we realized we had to cancel everything. So luckily, as a small organization without a lot of overhead, we are more resilient than other organizations, but you know, we were kind of on this growth incline, and now we're more just in survival mode, essentially. Yeah, we've had to definitely adapt everything we're doing, and you know, as a community-based organization, I think that's one of our strong points is our ability to adapt. So our first step was basically just to launch a fundraiser. We've been doing a crowdsourced fundraiser. We've raised almost $15,000, which is really encouraging. But it essentially only gets us through April, maybe May, in terms of like being able to pay, you know, our part-time workers and the artists we plan to book. We want to, you know, we're raising that money so that we can basically be able to still provide those funds even though the programming was canceled. And we're doing that through a really great platform that I wanted to kind of shout out. It's called With Friends. It's a national community of independent organizers, started in New York City, but it's basically run by artist organizers, DIY venues and whatnot. And they've created this really amazing platform where you can essentially sell tickets through it, but they run and administer a membership program for you. So it's a really great option for, you know, not even nonprofits necessarily, but smaller arts collectives or, you know, folks who they only do a few events a year. But it makes it really easy for people to kind of have a community of support. And they cut out a lot of the admin work for you. So we wanted to definitely shout that out. And through that platform, we've actually been tapping into this sort of national network of, you know, small arts organizations like us. And we've been having regular talks with them, which has been really interesting to see how folks all over the world are responding to it. We've definitely seen our volunteer retention suffer. I think it's just so much of what we do is based on community and bringing people together. And if we can't be together, it's really hard to keep people interested in doing a bunch of administrative work. So we've definitely limited the scope of, you know, what we've been able to do. And I think a lot of our productive volunteer time has more transferred to just like, you know, checking in on our volunteers and making sure that they're okay and that they have everything that they need. So we're kind of focusing what we're doing now and limiting it a little bit more to focusing more exclusively on grant writing. We launched a blog on our website. We're basically prioritizing like all virtual content. Luckily we reach, you know, even before this, we were reaching like thousands of people a day through our social media. So it's really great that we can still use that platform to share the work of, you know, what we're doing and the writers that we're activating with our blog. But also we're just continuing to check in with our community partners and our folks who are mission aligned with us. Our mission is to serve undervalued communities. So we've definitely continued doing that, and, you know, our community partners are doing some really great stuff, and we're happy to just kind of share that and just kind of shout out all the awesome work that's happening. Yeah, and yeah, just generally, I would say we're acting kind of as the glue between all the resources that are out there. There's just so much out there. And I think it can be really overwhelming for folks, individual artists, to understand what is relevant to them. So we've been sharing, resources that are related to arts, but also we recognize that our community kind of intersects with low income and working class people in general. So we've been definitely paying attention to the housing crisis and sharing, places to get food and just general resources like that. We've also, started planning a future event with one of our community partners, the Cambridge Community Center, which is to take place at an undetermined date, but we're going to fundraise the money now and try to pay the artists right now. So that's a fun initiative that we're working on right now. As far as staff goes, as a volunteer run organization, we pay our stipends out through 1099, so we're not eligible for any of these programs, even if they did have money. So, we thought we might be eligible for the EIDL program, but, we've learned recently that they're cutting it back to just paying $1,000 per W-2 employee, which again, we're not eligible for that. So we are basically, we limited our staff to the essentials. And we're just trying to write other grants and, through our crowdfunding campaign, be able to keep paying those stipends out. Luckily, we do have some income from our studios, so that also helps a little bit. Definitely, just the gaps in the funding is something that we're really worried about, and something that we've observed and heard about from other organizations that are our size. Even for the National Endowment for the Arts grant, or the money that is coming through the National Endowments for the Arts, we've heard that people have, they're unclear about whether they're eligible to receive any of those if they have never been funded by the NEA before. So yeah, we're just seeing a lot of gaps, and that definitely is worrisome to us. Other things that we've observed is, as an event promotion platform, we've noticed that the lead time on a lot of virtual events is greatly decreased. Folks used to organize their events, a month in advance, and now you're lucky if you get a week notice on these types of things. So normally we maintain a calendar on our website of events that are going on that are organized by independent artists and whatnot, but we're struggling to do that now because basically it would be a full-time job in itself to find everything great on Instagram and put it online. So that's something that we've observed. People's behavior is definitely changing. I think it's just hard for people to think further than a week and a half into the future. So definitely relatable. And yeah, we're just, we're worried in general about the digital divide, and we know a lot of our community doesn't necessarily have access to a lot of the technology that's required to access, not just grants and whatnot, but just resource sharing opportunities like this. And that's something that we're not quite sure how to tackle that with our limited capacity, but our approach is basically to just try to get grants where we can directly pay people that we know and artists that we know are struggling, and be able to provide opportunities, maybe through Cash App or through Venmo, because not a lot of people have direct deposit or necessarily even a bank account. So that's just stuff that we're thinking about. We have changed, we have set up live stream capability in our space, the Dorchester Art Project, but we're a little bit unsure about promoting that type of behavior in the first place, because if someone were to do a live stream event here, they might have to bring a few people together. They might have to take public transportation to get down here. So our first instinct was to provide that for our people, but we're a little bit unsure about promoting it. We were able to do an awesome live stream with Arts Connect International, which I'm sure Allegra will talk all about. And that was great, but in general, we're just not sure about how we should really proceed with that. But to close out, yeah, we've just seen so much innovation from our artists that we know. You know, I've been in a a club Zoom situation where there was like multiple different rooms. You know, one was the dance floor, one was the bar, one was the line for the bathroom. Like people are really innovating, and it's really great to see. And you know, we know that our artist community is just gonna continue to adapt to whatever's coming our way, but we are worried about who's being left out of the conversation. So that's something that we'll be thinking about.
Thanks so much, Emma. We appreciate you sharing Brain Arts Organization, what you all are going through. All right. So we're going to bring it to Allegra next, and I just want to be mindful of our time. So we're going to I'll let you all know when you have about 2 to 3 minutes left in the chat. So Allegra, it's on you. Allegra, are you here?
I'm here.
Oh, great. There you go. You're welcome to start.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Hello, everyone. So I'm Allegra. I'm here from Arts Connect International. And we're a nonprofit based in Boston, and we focus on research, community contextualized gatherings, leadership development, and consulting. And I think the biggest sorry, I can't see myself, and I don't know if it's working.
You're good.
We can see you.
Okay.
Yep, you're all set.
Okay. And so let me go through this pretty quickly. So I think the biggest impact that most of us are facing is around funding. And so funding and programming. So if we are in a space where we're doing community gatherings, but we can't gather in community, what does that look like? And so the biggest programming that we had to rethink is our Arts Equity Summit. And that's taking place next week, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And the really in our decision, to make this physical gathering virtual, there were a couple of pieces with that, right? There was the question about staff capacity, will we be able to turn this around in a month and make this happen? What does this mean? When we made the decision, there hadn't yet been all of the gathering bans, there hadn't yet been the shelter in place types of recommendations, and so we were making it a little bit ahead. We made that decision because we were looking at other things that were happening around the world, and we were like, okay, if we look at the trajectory of how coronavirus is impacting communities, we want to be prepared for this gathering, and it means a lot to us that we're able to have this because these are artists and speakers. This is income for people who depending on how you make your income, this could be a significant thing for you. And so recognizing that there would be, if buildings are closed down, there would be people who would be losing gigs and other opportunities. We wanted to be a space where that opportunity wouldn't be lost. And we wanted to really be able to follow through on that commitment to gather in community. And so we had a conversation and kind of came to this place where we decided we're here, we're ready, we're willing to do the work to transform the summit and make it virtual. And it was tough. We work with students at ACI, and so very shortly after we made that decision, their world imploded. These students are all either in a 1 year or in their last year of their master's programs. None of them are going to be able to walk. They finished their semesters virtually, and so there was just, some of them are displaced and moved, and so there's just a lot of holding that had to happen to support staff. That wasn't just the work that we're doing for the community outward, but also the work that we are doing for community inward. So what does it look like to take care of ACI as we are committed to taking care of the rest of our community as well? And so really some of the big questions that we have to think about is, what do we do? As an organization, we're really committed to all of these areas of making sure that the research, that the community gatherings, the leadership development, and the consulting all has a pulse on community, right? Community is at the center. And so now that the community is changing so much, we are looking at what does that mean for our programming too, and how can we create and work and adapt so that what we come up with and what we do is actually supporting people's needs and is what Boston needs. And so, yeah, I think it's kind of tough. We were looking at growth. We're looking at what are the new innovative ideas, new programming. We just expanded our board. We had like all of these like fun ideas in play, and it just means that we're trying to sit in a place of this is really difficult, but it is still an opportunity for innovation. It is still an opportunity to think creatively together. And so that's not always easy to do, but it is an effort that we're making to try and come back to that space. So I hope I answered the questions. But
yeah, that's totally fine. Thank you so much. Wasn't sure if you had anything else to say. Great. Thanks, Allegra. Really appreciate it. If anyone has questions for any of our speakers, please feel free to put them in the chat as we continue on. Great. And now we'll move on to Katherine Peterson from Arts Boston.
Hey, hi, Pascal. Thank you so much. It's really good to be here with everyone today. And I want to start by thanking Pascal and Cara for hosting these. They've been really helpful to us at Arts Boston, and I know other folks also. Arts Boston's an arts service organization with a membership of over 165 Greater Boston arts and cultural organizations of all sizes and disciplines, both for and nonprofit. And we work to expand audiences, strengthen our community, and advocate for the value that arts and culture and creativity bring to Greater Boston. We are a $1.5 million organization, and 65% of our revenue is earned income. We have programs that serve the arts community and also public-facing programs like our Bostix half-price ticket program and our online calendar. And so we have an interesting mix of revenue lines that we think about when we're putting together our programming and our budget. And way back in March 13th, we canceled all in-person member events and gatherings hosted by Arts Boston. We put a pause on our Bostix half-price ticket program, both online and in person at our two Bostix booths at Faneuil Hall Marketplace and also Copley Square. They are closed to the public until further notice. And we took a deep breath in terms of what that would mean, considering we are so highly reliant upon earned revenue. First thing we had to do was to make the hard decision to lay off our Bostix part-time booth staff. There are folks who did have other jobs in addition to the hours that they gave us at the booth. We were able to pay them through the end of March. We are committed to retaining the rest of our staff, and we are asking ourselves some key questions right now. We're looking at how far our cash reserve, our line of credit. As soon as we get the actual cash in the bank from the PPP, we'll take that into consideration. And looking at what that means in terms of what our financial projections look like. We are not anticipating any earned revenue between now and the end of August. And I am now going to be spending the weekend going through and doing a projection through the end of December with both no earned revenue and very little earned revenue, and to see where that gets us. We are really grateful to have stashed away small surpluses over the years. They've added up to a okay cash reserve for an art service organization. And we are really grateful that we took out a line of credit 20 years ago. We've never had to draw on it. And we reached out to our bank right away and said, we're taking this. We're not going to use it right now, but we want it because we don't want you to take it away from us. And we're really glad that we've put the time into having a relationship with our bank. I think it's made a difference. I agree with what Emma was saying about the inequities around philanthropy. We're seeing a lot of folks who are left out of funding opportunities because they're not part of funded cohorts, or they haven't been funded by the NEA. That doesn't have to do with the quality of the work that folks are doing now. And that is really going to hit certain folks in our sector. So right now, we're looking at a loss of probably between $400,000 and $500,000 for the rest of the year if things go the way that we think they will. And that's going to be really, really challenging for us. Looking ahead, we've been thinking about three things. We've been thinking about making sure that we elevate the impact that the sector has, the art sector has on Greater Boston. We're looking at making sure that we put a spotlight on the great engagement that the arts community is providing for the public, and we're rethinking what the future looks like. So to start off with, we've heard from Emily and from our colleagues at the Mass Cultural Council about the survey findings from everyone in the field about how devastating this has been on all of us. To add to the data that is useful to put this into perspective, to use for advocacy with Mass Creative in order to get additional support and funds going forward, we just reissued the findings of our 2019 Arts Factor Report. This is a really stark reminder of how much the cultural sector is an economic driver for us, to the tune of $2 billion a year in Greater Boston. That's 30,000 jobs, which is almost as much as the retail sector. And we have more cultural visitors to our museums and our performing arts institutions than our 4 sports teams combined. So that's a big impact. We've repurposed our events calendar, the Arts Boston calendar, into a listing of all the amazing online arts and entertainment that our members are generating, and we're delighted to be able to really promote that on our social media. And we're expanding the support for one of our programs, the Network for Arts Administrators of Color, which has 365 members. And we are launching a weekly virtual social on Tuesday evenings starting this April 25th. NAC members will be providing light facilitation, and there will be new programming announced from the Network for Arts Administrators of Color next month. And then we're pivoting the conversation, looking further down the line and thinking about what does it look like when folks are able to start coming back, and also what are the key considerations we need to be thinking about when we invite them back. It was really wonderful to see Jen from Silver Lynette on the line. The survey that Silver Lynette and La Placa Cohen are doing is terrific. It's going to help us all. And the fact that all of us can put in for it free of charge is amazing. So I encourage all of us to make sure that we sign up for that. In addition, we are going to be taking the regional lead on a longitudinal study that assesses how arts audiences are feeling about returning to our theaters and venues. And we're doing that in conjunction with Wolf Brown. And this is going to be a based on Arts Boston's own list of 60,000 arts goers, which is a pretty good cross-section of and representative of what we know from our own 1.5 million household Arts Boston Audience Initiative list, which comes from a variety of arts organizations. And we can see the crossover between our list and the rest of that, audience list from so many of you, and feel good about this being a good representation. So we'll be working with Wolf Brown on sampling 3,000 of that list every 2 weeks. And we will be sharing the results with the community on an ongoing basis, having discussions about the hard decisions we need to be making about how we invite people back and when. This is leading up to a larger conversation with, again, with so many of you about how do we work together in shaping those invitations? How do we work with our friends in the Restaurant Association, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, making sure that we have a compelling way to invite people back in a way that makes them feel comfortable. So there's a lot of work to be done. I think a lot about how we use this as a time to remember the things that haven't been working, and to use this as an opportunity to really shape how we want to be doing business, how we want to be making our art going forward. So thanks. I really appreciate the opportunity to share where we are right now.
Thank you so much, Katherine. If anybody has questions for Katherine, please use the chat to connect with her about it. And last but not least, we'll have David from Boston Public Library. And David, we do have your slides. They're right after this one.
Awesome. Thanks, Pascal. Hey, everybody. Good to be with you, and good to see so many familiar names and faces, and a few people that I look forward to getting to know in the next while, maybe when we get back to whatever is ahead of us after this phase of dealing with the epidemic. So first of all, I'm just sort of reminding all of us that for the library, we're now in week 5 since we closed to the public, and our buildings may be closed, but we now feel like we're very much open for business, although it's in a different mode. So next slide, please. So our operational focus during this time period has been really shifting to the online space and expanding online content and looking at online programming. Online programming has meant things like our amazing children's librarians doing little group readings, which you can actually go see on the Children's Library page on Facebook. They're absolutely an amazing way of engaging some of the youngest children who might be missing that kind of engagement. Also, book discussion groups, few author talks using everything from Zoom, FaceTime, Uber Conference, Google Hangout, you name it. I think we've tried it at this point. So it's been very important for us to see our staff, many of whom don't always live in this world, really embrace this new technology and platform, and really ensure that it's a way of engaging with our patrons during this time. I'll share some data on the next slide, and then I will talk a little bit about this new program, Books for Boston, which we did an official launch of today, although we've been working on it for the last few weeks, which allows us to, sorry, go back for a second, thank you, which allows us to, I don't want to spoil what's coming next, really continue some in-person outreach focused on the most vulnerable populations, those who are in hospitals, those who are in isolation spaces, basically doing big book care packages for those institutions to ensure they have access to reading material particularly because it's groups that the online experience just doesn't work for them or doesn't work for them yet, maybe because of lack of resource or lack of devices. And then, like many of you, also ensuring that we're keeping a focus on professional development opportunities for staff who aren't able to perform their normal functions in this world, keeping our buildings happy and safe, and working with city colleagues. We are lucky and privileged enough to be part of the City of Boston, and so are able to continue paying staff, security personnel, including our hourly and affiliate staff, are all being fully paid. And we also made the decision to continue paying program partners, both individuals and organizations, through the end of the fiscal year. We'll find a way of engaging with them as we need to, but for right now, we have an obligation, and we were able to meet it, so we felt we should. Next slide, please. Here's a scattering of data from the 4 weeks since we closed around the level of engagement with our population, all online. Some of this was very surprising to us, how fast and how quickly these numbers actually grew. The most significant one really is that we had 10,000 patrons sign up for new library cards during this period. Now remember, please, that library cards are available to anyone who goes to school, works, or lives in Massachusetts, not just the City of Boston. And so it's a broader reach than just the city proper. But that's still, that 10,000 new signups is an amazing number. And then to see that we've had at least 200,000 individual patron usage of their library card during that period. So we were incredibly gratified to realize that people would not only continue to use our services online, but work out how to do it and see it as a replacement while our buildings remain closed, which we can't wait to get back to, but one thing at a time. So that's just really, I think, a great symbol of keeping the flag going and ensuring that we may not be on the front lines from a public health or public safety point of view, but we're providing a meaningful impact in people's lives. Next slide, please. So then, just to talk about this program that was really officially launched today, Books for Boston, really focusing on some of the organizations. The first slate are listed here. Some are more obvious organizations that you will obviously recognize the name of. Others are smaller neighborhood organizations, because we obviously have to do this in a way that allows both us and them to maintain the social distancing guidelines. And what the other beauty of this is, we were able to work with some of the local bookstores that are otherwise closed, and that's been our source for these materials, not necessarily the big publishers or big national companies, but really try to prioritize sourcing these books from the local businesses that are otherwise struggling. So really is a two for here. One of our staff, her daughter works with media, and so put together this little video message that we're going to try and display for you here as part of this. So Christina, good luck with this experiment, and we'll see if we can play the video, and then I have one more slide to finish out my update. Some of you may not get the music, but I encourage you to go click on the link later. You'll find it on bpl.org or on supportbpl.org. And there are also captions to display what's going on. Or maybe we can just post the link in the chat. That would probably work too. But for us, this turned out to be both a really important thing to do and find a way to deliver our services to individuals in person, but also it's turned into a feel-good moment for staff that we're connecting with people who really need the services. So we'll just click back to the slides, and I'll finish out with my last slide, which really talks about some of the ingredients in what a future reopening, what that will look like. Obviously, I'm not able to talk about any timing yet, because we're still in a period where There's continued uncertainty about when that would be and what the guidance will be when some of the restrictions that we're all living with are lifted, presumably some period post-surge, post-peak, based on the models that Margaret and others have talked about before. But we think the elements that we have under consideration and in planning right now will assume that we'll go back to some limited services, that these will get phased in a staggered reopening. You know, we've seen some discussion and guidance at the federal level about talking about this at three stages. And clearly, these elements are within the first and second stages of what that overall framework might look like. We think our staffing levels might involve a slow return to some locations, maybe not all locations at once. Maybe people doing rotations, so we minimize the number of people who will come back during the first period. Equally understanding that those who can do their work remotely maybe should continue to do their work remotely for some period of time. The operating protocols for our spaces will probably involve some continued use of PPE, some updated understanding of what the social distancing regulations are. We'll borrow from what grocery stores and restaurants and other public spaces will see, and continue to put a high priority on cleaning regimens, all of which are part of our current reality, but probably continue once we can consider a limited reopening. In terms of services, you know, we're thinking separately about maybe putting books on hold and picking them up, what computer usage needs to be in a managed environment, what solo studying a couple of desks away from each other looks like. With respect to our collections, the collections that are in the buildings are now fine because they haven't been touched in a while, but we do know for books coming back, probably need a 24-hour or 72-hour at the extreme quarantine period. But we're doing some tests with colleagues around the country in terms of what that really looks like. So everybody, by the time we get to this point, will understand that we're doing the right things and have some level of certainty about what will keep patrons and book usage safe. And obviously the last thing we will be reactivating, we expect, will be the mid to large size gatherings, because right now the expectation is the first stage will be still at gatherings of 10 people. And we've seen other guidance talk about, well, when does that go to 25? When does that go to 250? And when does that go beyond? So those could be weeks, months away, but these are some of the elements that our team is looking at, and what will be the right way to tier this, based always on what does the data tell us, what does the science tell us, what does public health tell us, and what in our case do the mayor and the governor tell us as well. So those are just at least the considerations and ingredients in what we're talking about. So I better go look at the chat, but that's my update, Pascal and Kara, and thanks Christina for doing that.
Thanks so much, David. We truly appreciate it. All right, let's move on. I know Kara and Christina have a few things to just let us know about citywide. Go for it.
Yeah, just real quick. And I also just want to say thanks, David, for sharing some initial thoughts on what does it look like to reopen? Because I know we're all struggling with that, and it's so helpful to see an example, especially from a city facility. So that's great to see. Thank you. So just really quickly before we open it up to any other questions, wanted to post a reminder that we do have this new way to share virtual events on the city website on boston.gov. You can self-submit them. We're using this as a really handy way to share things with other city departments that have constituents that they're trying to reach specifically with ways to be engaged and help fight the feeling of isolation. So appreciate, yes, Christina just posted the link in the chat. If you have some events that you want to share with us that way, please do. We can go to the next slide. I want to say a big thank you to folks who are tagging us in their Zoom selfies or other kinds of selfies, wearing face coverings, really just trying to hit this home and make this as normal as possible, even when it doesn't feel that way. And I also shout out Me Too Orchestra for all the people with wind instruments that have masks on at the same time. I enjoyed that just personally. Next slide. And then I wanted to just share that, and maybe some folks on this call were also on another call, earlier this week on arts education and creative youth development. And a big shout out to Edvestors and MCC and others who helped organize that. We had over 100 participants on that call, everyone from BPS art teachers to organizations, teaching artists, had some really amazing presentations. And this was really about creating a platform specifically for people to share experiences, virtual learning challenges, examples of lesson plans, new platforms. I feel like I heard about 50 new online platforms that I did not know about before just from listening to that call. And yes, people making it happen, just really resourceful folks trying to figure out how to get through this new world of engaging with young people digitally. And we will be sharing a list of resources and tools that were shared through the chat and through the presentations, and also a video once we get a video uploaded. And we're looking at possibly repeating this and trying to understand how often it makes sense for that group to meet specifically. Yes, it was recorded, and we will get that back out to everyone as soon as we have it up. So I just wanted to share that back out for folks who weren't able to make that call specifically. And I think that is it from me. So we can
Awesome.
open it up for any questions.
Yes. Any questions? I'm looking back in the chat. Not seeing anything yet. Oh, Luke has a
Luke.
super quick. Yeah, go for it, Luke. Please.
Sorry, I was on mute.
No worries.
So we tentatively heard that possibly as early next week, the pandemic unemployment assistance program might be available. No confirmation yet. It's still kind of hearsay and up in the air, but we'll be working on developing resources that are responsive to that as soon as possible, as soon as that information is available. And in the meantime, we still are doing one-on-one technical support for people who need help with now mostly the unemployment program at this point, because as we've heard many times today, the federal programs are still working on reappropriating and replenishing. But just wanted to give a quick update that possibly maybe a week or so early, but don't necessarily hold your breath just yet. But we did hear some rumblings of that might be the case.
Thank you so much, Luke, for that update. Truly appreciate it. Any questions? Nothing yet.
Yes, big thanks to the presenters. Thanks, David Howes, for adding that in. If people don't have questions, adding love into the chat is also totally acceptable.
Yes, please.
Great. Ask and you shall receive.
Oh, since we any other networking opportunities for staffers? Anybody? I know that Arts Boston mentioned theirs. Does anybody have their own in any of their organizations? And if anybody does, you're welcome to also put it in the chat, and we can also share that in the meeting recap info. I'll also shout out, I sent this email to all of you, I believe, right before the meeting, but we are also having an individual artist COVID-19 meeting next Tuesday at 11:30 on Zoom. So I do believe I sent you all the invite, but if you did not receive it, please let me know. I'm happy to send it along. And please share it with any individual artists you work with, we really are trying to provide the same resources we're providing the organizations, but geared towards individual artists. Luke will be on the call. Emily will be there too, as well as Julia Ryan from the mayor's office. So if you have any questions about that or would like that information again, please email me and I'd be happy to send it to you. Of her image. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes, public shout out to our model in our actual image, or the photographer. Yes, I was like, which image? Is it on her computer? Oh, that is amazing. Yes, Leah, thank you for being there. You'll be there every Friday, so we'll make sure to shout you out as well. Unbound Visual Artists has kicked off hashtag Creative Strong Boston, and all sectors are welcome to tag the hashtag as well. So please use the hashtag Creative Strong Boston when you can on your social media. ICA is hosting an Instagram Live event this Sunday. Live DJ soundtrack with the brunch recipe. More info on the ICABoston.org website if you have any information. Kelly Gifford from the ICA is on here too if you want to ask her specifically about it as well.
Okay. See some people signing off. Thanks so much for joining us again this week. I really love seeing everybody and hearing from everyone. Thanks to the presenters. Have a good weekend. We're just going to pretend that it's not snowing tomorrow. Just focus on Sunday, sunny and 60, because that's the kind of weather we have right now. Have a good weekend.
Yes, thank you all so much.